Greetings and welcome to another Stompy 51 miniature adventure, taking you on a journey beyond sight and sound to 1986 into a gorgeous Games Workshop book which charts the transition from role-playing to wargaming, with some gorgeous artwork and pictures of minis along the way. So, painting and collecting miniature figures for role-playing games by Stuart Parkinson, Heroes for Wargames. And even then, the Chaos Warrior with his shield alive with demonic energy, already a thing. Although, is his name Melvin? All drawings, paintings, figures and games by Games Workshop, 1986. Art by Martin Dean. Front cover art by Melvin Grant, that's why it says Melvin. And back cover art by Bob Naismith. Yes, now we're familiar with that one. The Golden Demon alive and well, even in 1986. And special thanks to John Blanche. Without his help and contribution, this book would not have been possible, nor indeed Warhammer. And of course, in particular, Brian Ansell for use of his studios and the generous access he gave to artwork and figures. And then, falling apart here, and then we have a beautiful piece of John Blanche artwork. The Landsknecht dwarf with his kind of Renaissance, early modern hat, already a thing. The Slayer dwarf with little bits of kind of arrow feather stuck to him, already a thing. Blood dripping off his Slayer axe. Cossack dwarf, Norse dwarfs, Scottish dwarfs, proper Slayer dwarf. So the whole concept of Slayer dwarves was already a thing in 1986. Gorgeous, gorgeous. I probably should take a photo and put this up online somewhere because I'm not sure I've ever seen that. So I wonder how many other people have seen it either. Introduction. Knight of Law, Tony Atland. We live in a world which, through its sophistication of technology, well, in 1986, what sophistication of technology was there, encourages specialization. They ain't seen nothing yet. We're expected to pursue one employment, to finally hone our skills at our chosen job. The engineer, architect, and surgeon each fit neatly into the system without any real appreciation of the other's job. Yeah, it's called silo thinking, happens now. And yet relying on them for their expertise in times of need. To be a jack of all trades is to be a master of none. So it is refreshing then to see people developing new skills through their hobby. Role-playing games, the pastime that has occupied our last 10 years, still holds its original appeal. It encourages creative thinking. But the figures shown in this book were born of a need in the games themselves, and yet they've acted as a bridge for many people into a new form of art. The dedication which they pursue their hobby demonstrates that rather than simply accepting the limitations of rules, they are experiencing pleasure by attempting to paint. Do you know what? I speak lightly of this, but there's a very important point there, isn't there? Because we all have our jobs, and this hobby has allowed us all to be kind of artists on the side, jacks of all trade. And, we've all migrated from role-playing games, well, not me, but many migrated from that to miniature war games, and this was obviously happening in the 80s. I wonder if there's more war gamers than role players at the moment. I have no idea. I've never been into role playing. Leave it in the comments. And then there's this, I've never liked this kind of grotesque art, but it is very well done. Again, John Blanche, Cthulhu Inferno. You've got this slightly hairy red demon with a face on his tummy and on his face, bringing forth all these other demonic creatures. And then I don't know what in the world that is up there. It looks like some kind of demonic fetus emerging from the heavens. Anyway, role-playing games. Now, I have no interest in role-playing games, so we're going to skip through all of this. Metal soldiers have had a place in civilization since the earliest times. Toy soldiers also used as decoration. But we're now moving on. Bloodbath at Orcs Drift games. So Orcs Drift was already a thing, obviously, making a gag of Rorke's Drift in the wars with the Zulus that the Victorians carried out. And you've got what have you got here? You've got adventurers, barbarians, heroes, and samurai. And then barbarians, fools, adventurers, and villagers. He kind of has moved with the times. That's quite fun. Someone praying with their arms out to the dark gods. I mean, the quality of these miniatures is not great. Some artwork by Dave Andrews, Thieves in the Night. Looks like one of the Grimm's fairy tales, that, you know, the musicians of Bremen. Stranger in Town by Dave Andrews. And again, that kind of late medieval house building that moved into kind of Mordheim. I mean, if someone said build this up for a bit of a Mordheim scenario, you'd think, yep, great. And then some kind of zombie attack, again by Dave Andrews. Cosmic Encounter game. I think I've heard of Cosmic Encounter. I never played it. And now we come to the kind of proto 40k with your Space Marines over there. Deep Space Mercenaries. Wow, they weren't called Space Marines. Deep Space Mercenaries, there you go. An Imperial Trooper by Dave Andrews, who does look like something out of Dune. I must go see Dune 2 in the cinema. I managed to miss the first one in the cinema. Bit of Judge Dredd. Killer robots and mutant psychos. Have they really moved on from that as kind of underlying gaming concepts? Judge Dredd characters, city lowlifes, and a death squad. Yeah, I'm not sure these days you'd have orcs who are actually dressed up and painted as Nazis. Quite rightly. Fantasy battles. Right, this is what we're about. Role-playing games originated from Wargames' roots. Now with the production of enormous quantities of different fantasy figures, the process has come full circle. There are now rules for fantasy wargames. The latest pure wargames rules allow for many eventualities, weather, time of year, effectiveness of weapons, troop training, and so on. But that was the kind of crunchiness of the times, and now everything is slimline, so we've dropped all that again. Were enough miniatures available, one could easily recreate the whole of the Battle of Waterloo, man for man, and I'm sure that's been done. These rules are realistic, original, and cleverly put together, but they have difficulty engendering the same excitement as a dwarven hang glider attack. Fantasy tabletop battles are primarily meant to be fun. In most sets of rules, constricting guidelines have been ruthlessly hacked away to give a clean and entertaining approach to wargaming. In theory, with all else being equal, the better player should still win. Well, that's generally my experience. You know, even though these are dice games, the better winner does tend to win out. In traditional wargames, each figure usually represents more than one man. Often a miniature will be the equivalent of 20 to 50 due to the huge size of regiments and the small size of playing surfaces. But in fantasy battles, there is no such restriction. One man is one man, one goblin is a goblin, and one dragon is clearly just one dragon. Revenge of the Leashmaster by John Blanche. So presumably, that's the Leashmaster. And that's the very characterful white general. Fighting, oh my goodness, 1986, are those Skaven. Very fully formed Skaven, even with their little runic inscriptions. Albeit a human seems to be the one who's bringing forth all of these Skaven, so humans get abandoned. But crikey, so all this came from the mind of John Blanche, did it? There are various types of armies available: goblin hordes, orcish war parties, dwarven bands. They can't spell hordes, but I suppose in those days there was no auto-spell or autocorrect. It's not difficult to make up regiments of figures, nor the terrain on which to use them, nor need it be expensive. Well, I mean, it is. Most guild equipment is made from household rubbish, and although it requires work, a few attempts should quickly hone the necessary skills. Castle towers can be made from kitchen roll tubes and walls from polystyrene. Oh, how we have moved on. Chaos Knight, Dave Andrews. Chronicle Orcs by Tony Ackland. Psychostyrene Dwarves by John Blanche. I love the little emblem on the shield there. And Drastic Plastic Orcs by John Blanche. I don't get it. These aren't made of styrene and those aren't made out of plastic. Albeit maybe they're representing some miniatures that were later produced in plastic. But basically, all this text describes kind of proto-wargaming. Comedy. Orc Irregular Army with Standard Bearer. And is that Margaret Thatcher? Yes, it is. Maggie, Maggie, Maggie. Orc, orc, orc. Yeah, not impressed by these orcs. Not up to current standards, but some people do like them. I mean, they do look like they've been done by a university student who's had a bit of a go. But I suppose that was the technological limit of the time in terms of what you could cast. Slan Frogman Warriors by John Blanche. I like that one, who's just bloating his cheeks. And of course, there's the human slaves. I think I saw some other sculptor who's very recently done a Kickstarter for some very retro-looking Slan Frogmen, albeit they're not called that. And if you remember rightly, they had these human slaves who kind of carried the big fat Slan wizard on a dais, I think it's called. And he said, no, I'm going to replace them with Slan Frogman Warriors because I no longer feel comfortable about having slaves. Again, the sensibilities have rightly changed. But look at how intricate. And Mashika, all the little weapons and things are. That's gorgeous. Sitemap by Dave Andrews. Village at Night by Dave Andrews. Wouldn't want to be in that village. The hawk there looks pretty menacing. Dwarf Miners. Wouldn't want to be there either, as one dwarf pulls up this little wagon load of gems or metals. And Skeleton Irregulars, also by Dave Andrews. More of the, frankly, slightly unimpressive orcs. Some kind of dwarves. If you can't really think of a storyline, look to films or literature. Scenarios that have already appeared have gone under the titles The Magnificent Seven, Bloodbath at Orc's Drift, and Macbeth. The latter, based on Shakespeare's play of nearly the same name, presumably Macbeth, is nearly as tragic as the original work. Written by Richard Halliwell, it plagiarises this masterpiece of the English language and pits such opponents as the McEwen clan versus the Meccanoes and the Grievance. As they're just telling you how to be inspired. Midgarth, Lady Macbeth, and Dart of Harkness, John Blanche. And in this image I've seen online in various places, one can easily turn any story into a battle scenario with the injection of a little humour. So what have we got over there? Is that a treeman? That's a treeman, that's a wolf. Sister of Battle type. And then loads of... I'm not sure what those are. Dark looking knights. Figure making, I wonder who that is. Let's have a closer look. Opposite, Ailey Morrison working on a new range of creatures. New in 1986. Figure making is a complex process requiring years of practice to perfect. And they go into the process a bit. Many things inspired the initial drawing, visualization of a hero from a novel, artwork from comic strips and paintings. The resultant drawings are passed on to the designers. Each, of course, has his own particular style. An example of this is the work of the famous American designer Tom Meyer. He accentuates accuracy and proportion, and so his figures are thin and delicate when compared to other more robust designs. Not my kind of guy. I'm more for the kind of Mark Copplestone, keep it simple and conceptual style. Above, Wizards and Their Familiars concept sheet by John Blanche. Once we've got the drawing, completed details begin to be added to the basic dolly made out of modular's putties, kind of like working on chewing gum, rolls of putty. Gradually the sculpture is refined with weapons, etc. Top left, Jez Goodwin fixing arms on a new figure. There's no one in that picture. Bottom left, Jez Goodwin's workplace. Top right, Trish Morrison's workbench, dragons in progress. That's not Trish Morrison there, presumably. I think they've messed up that. But again, proofreading not always a strength. Tony Ackland producing artwork for the magazine. Bob Naismith, resident alchemist, turns gold into lead. And then Bob's workplace. A Warriors of Chaos concept drawing by Jez Goodwin. What is it about Jez Goodwin? His stuff just lasts forever. If that were done now, you'd be like, yep, great concept sketch there. Get ZBrush out and 3D sculpting. Crest falling down the back. Knee guard, greave to elbow plates, embossed Chaos symbol. Chaos Warrior and Chaos Sorcerer concepts by Jez Goodwin again. I mean, look at that. I mean, slightly Eldar looking, Old Sinchi, but still, nothing wrong with that. Gold star to Jez Goodwin there. And then what are these? Beastmen by John Blanche. And again, those two certainly look like they could be from yesterday. They look very, is it 4th, 5th edition Warhammer? But some of these are just general kind of beasts which aren't goatmen. I mean, that one's a little rhino. So I'm not sure that that kind of thing has stood the test of time. I'm sure I've got a miniature not unlike this one, albeit I think it was made by one of the then sculptors under his own brand. Is it Die Hard Miniatures? I'll get it out another time. Oops. Warriors of Chaos by John Blanche. Again, a bit of a range there. A female warrior. Loads of hats that look like they've been taken out of the wars of the Trojan Wars. Persia. So a kind of more eclectic mix of different kinds of chaos, which I think has come out more in, is it Warhammer Underworlds? And oh, there's loads of these pencil sketches. So we've got even more demon frogmen and human slave warriors. So there's some human slave warriors. And then loads of frogmen doing their thing. So I can't remember the history exactly, but didn't the Aztecs have some kind of Hilit people who they kind of conquered and had a flower war with every year? Like the Spartans had locals they subjugated, and so I suppose maybe that's kind of vaguely based on that. Given these frogmen clearly look like they are the Mashika. Armoured orcs. Again, looking slightly more comical than ones you get these days, and perhaps a little bit more Lord of the Rings meets high fantasy. Giants, everyone loves a giant, albeit I've always preferred kind of human-looking giants, Viking-looking giants, rather than like weird, chaosy-looking giants, or ones with strange scales. But you know what? All of this is just screaming creativity. A blunder club. Oh, so, yep, and it's firing out nails over there. That would be a good idea. I can imagine that modern sculptors at GW do mine these things for ideas. RuneQuest Dark Trolls by John Blanche. So I don't think this has survived in any manner. Chaos Knights. I mean, we certainly recognise that fellow over there. Is he Harry the Hammer in prototype? And all of these you could certainly find today. Look how creative that beaky helm is. Goodly Knights. Maybe something you would now see in A Song of Ice and Fire, which I suspect also maybe perhaps drew on this kind of thing. Single figures. More Ratmen by Jez Goodwin. Ah, look at that Gracier. He looks just like something you'd find today. And I hadn't realised that that model was from 1986 or earlier. And here we have Skaven Chaos Ratmen, Warp Flamethrower Crew, and Irregulars, which is quite funky, given that I think these are all being souped up and released in plastic very soon. Orcs by the Perry Twins. That looks very early stuff. Elves by Ailey Morrison. I will give close-ups of these. I recognise it is getting a bit dark, but these are not that exciting. Chaos Dwarves and Dwarves by the Perry Twins. Fighters by Jez Goodwin, which I think are so far some of the best I've seen. Albeit some of those Dwarves by the Perrys are pretty good. Skaven Chaos Ratman by Jez Goodwin. I did not know that he did those, and those are fantastic. Chaos Knights. Giant Ogres and Wizards. Some humongous Balrog and small dragons. I mean, that Balrog must have cost a fortune and just gone crunch every time you knocked it. Beastman by Kev Adams. Ooh, we do love Kev Adams. And strangely, of course, his stuff some of the best. Trolls and Toad Dragon by the Perry Twins and Nick Bibby. A wistfulness to them. A Great Spine Dragon by Nick Bibby. One which you see in all of the early Golden Demon awards. Paint Set 1 by John Blanche. How you paint. Dave Andrews creating shield designs and looking like he's been caught like a bunny in the headlights. The basic bare metal figure, the miniature, is a fighter named Lord Aquila, sculpted by Jeremy Goodwin, Jez Goodwin, and that you see on eBay all the time, no doubt recasts, because there can't be that many around. And still a goer. Dwarves, more dwarves. Even more dwarves. Chaos Beastman with Standard Bearer. Yeah, not convinced by these, albeit he looks like Caesar from Planet of the Apes, with his sort of face painted in a skeletal white pattern. Chaos Warriors, painted slightly slimily in that manner I just don't like. I'm sure I saw someone selling that one for £8 on a forum somewhere. Maybe I'll pick it up. I hadn't realised it was that old. Colouring tips, painting large figures. Monster Paints by Bob Naismith. Gorgeous little piece of artwork, that one. The Warlock by John Blanche. The Whirlwind by John Blanche. The Great Spine Dragon by Tony Ackland. Winding cotton around the join is a good way of strengthening the bond and adding realism, a technique pioneered by Kev Adams and John Blanche, both highly accomplished painters, is to add moss to the branches to make them appear old and used. They do this with a mixture of sand and glue. The resulting stippled surface is painted dark green, then dry brushed with a lighter shade of the same colour. Oh, such creativity. And these days, what would we do? We would just buy a special effect and just dab it on. A Great Spine Dragon painted. Adventurer on a pony is confronted by a blue dragon. And Minotaur, Troll and Dwarf, showing relative sizes. Minotaur, Troll and Dwarf. That is a great looking Minotaur in terms of how he's positioned. Zombie Dragon by John Blanche. There's a dragon's head. There's a dragon's body. in a slightly spectral way, with his guts sort of half hanging out, and you can see his ribs, and then some kind of chaosy knight has decided to take him out, or at least one that is very high fantasy, with a gleaming axe. Great Spined Dragon, a prize-winning diorama by Nick Bibby, and The Slaughter at Skullgate. They always loved skulls, didn't they? Eternal Champions, Mutant, and The Bride and Groom. Bride of Frankenstein, very good. And then this piece of artwork, does it explain what it is? Pages 112 to 113, Warhammer by John Civic. And you've got a bit of a path, you've got some orcs and goblins coming down the stairs, and then some kind of gladiator ogre grabbing someone who seems to be smiling despite being about to be beaten to death. I'm sure this is on the cover of some kind of role-playing game. But again, comments below. Master Painters, Kev Adams. I always treat painting miniatures as a hobby and not as an awkward job. About the only paints that I avoid are oils, since they take so long to dry and are just not worth it. I use acrylics, alkyds, inks, and watercolors. John Blanche at work there in the studio. Green Dragon by Kev Adams. If you decide to paint, you have three options: learn by your mistakes, try an alternative style or invent your own methods, or advertise your services as a painter of amoebas and psychedelic goblins dressed in cobwebs under disco lights. Some of those guys, what were they smoking? But they were having fun. Is that a goblin having a wee? Anyway. And that's a very famous troll miniature. And I'm sure I've seen, is it Felix Paniagua of Avatars of War kind of come up with a more modern 3D sculpted version. John Blanche, he offers his tips. Look at your figures to see if there's any conversion work you'd like to undertake. Do not try too much, as heaps of spikes, severed heads, swords and axes can hide the figure and destroy the very qualities that made it attractive in the first place. Oh, I've never taken that on board. If you can go overboard, just do it. Hints and Ideas, Gothic Amazon by John Blanche. Fantasy modelers tend still to ignore light as a useful item in their bag of tricks. Fiber optics, for example, are incredibly easy to use and can be very effective. They are generally available in lengths of 1 meter or more and in various diameters. I don't even know what they're talking about. Bending fibers. Fibers have many uses. They can light up inaccessible areas, throw beams onto relevant parts of dioramas, or form interesting effects. One could, for instance, have made a diorama where a large water monster has just erupted from a swamp to attack an adventurer on a boat. The diorama could be cut into a wooden base. If the bottomless was hollowed out, then a bulb could be placed there, powered by 2 small batteries. Oh, I see. Oh, I'm never going to do that. Who does that? 2 views of John Blanche's 3-headed Minotaur. I don't remember that miniature, but someone ingeniously was able to paint the Mona Lisa onto it. So, there is a lot of artistic talent out there at this time. Banners, Baleful Banners by John Blanche, and Samurai Designs by John Blanche. Now that's just naughty. I mean, I know they did, but really. Norse Flags by John Blanche, and Gnome Flags and Shields by Trish Morrison. Baneful Banners. Do you know what? Wouldn't it be cool to colour print some of these and put them onto your miniatures? Just to kind of keep that connection with the 80s? I think I might well do that. I mean, that one's clearly dwarf. And that one's clearly kind of orcish. I'm not sure what material that you would use. That could clearly go on to a Norse banner these days. And on the subject of banners, we'll keep the miniature Oldhammer flag flying high another time in another video. But for now, that's it. So please do like, comment. I love reading comments and replying. And subscribe, because the positive affirmation always does me all manner of good. But for now, keep well, keep safe, and see you soon.